Hi, everybody. Welcome back to WorkTech. I'm George LaRocque, and I'm excited for today's conversation. If you're like me, you're a big fan of assessment science. I've seen it work so well firsthand in the field, but I've also been waiting my entire career to see more than just incremental improvements to the assessment experience, which, let's face it, has pretty much been the same since we were filling them in with number two pencils. It just moved to the computer and to the phone. And while the assessment market has been slowly evolving from paper to our devices, that experience has been taken, like, leapfrogged forward by our guests today, and not just once but twice. They've taken the market to a new place with this experience. And so I'm really happy to introduce the Traitify team to the WorkTech community. Traitify by Paradox is assessment tech that's integrated into Paradox's conversational AI hiring solutions that they bring to market. Traitify was acquired by Paradox back in 2021, and they had already innovated that first leapfrog jump was into a visual format, making it the first visual assessment and the fastest assessment on the market, and one that both candidates and employees actually enjoy. Earlier this year, they did it again with an animated assessment led by an avatar named Ash, which brings some incredible benefits for customers and candidates that we'll talk about today. So I'm joined by the team behind Traitify to tell us more. Welcome all.
Hey, George, thanks for having us on.
I'm excited. I've been excited to have this conversation and to bring the market into it for a while. But before we dig in, can each of you maybe introduce yourselves and explain what your role is with Paradox?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Dan Sines. I was the CEO and co-founder at Tradify, now VP of product here at Paradox.
And hey, George, I'm Josh Spears. I was also a co-founder at Traitify, chief product officer for Traitify, and now VP of product at Paradox.
Hi, George. Thanks so much for having us today. Very excited to be here. I am Dr. Heather Myers, and I'm the chief biopsychologist here at Paradox.
Thank you all for being here. I know everybody's super busy, and I really, really appreciate this. So for those who don't know Traitify, maybe a high-level picture of what you do and a little bit of how you do it.
Yeah, so what we've created at Traitify is a visual-based assessment that's used in the hiring process to help find candidates who are best fit for the position. What we've really innovated, though, is the format of that assessment. So like I said, it's image-based, it's very fast, takes about 90 seconds to complete, and has a 96% completion rate. So a much more fun, fast, and engaging way to measure personality within the hiring process.
Yeah, fast and fun aren't usually things that we say about assessments. I'm going to stop picking on assessments because I really do value them. But what, while I mentioned earlier, I've worked with and I talked to a lot of assessment providers, a lot of assessment tech providers, and they're really on this incremental path that I talked about. What led you to change things up with the visual assessment? What was the spark?
Yeah, I would say, George, really the spark behind it was having two founders, and Dan and myself, who really weren't experts in assessments, but were kind of experts in multimedia and film and design. And because of that, we approached things completely differently than you would if you were coming from an existing assessment background. So we actually, way back in 2011, started the company with a very different purpose. So I had recently come back to Baltimore, where Dan and I are both born and raised, and went on a very bad blind date. It was not a love connection at all. And I came back to Dan and I said, it'd be really great if we had an application that could actually learn about my personality and learn about the personality of the person I was going and doing something with, and then suggest things for us that were applicable to both of our personalities so that we'd have a better time. And we both were like, wow, it's a great idea, but how do we go about collecting all this information, all this data without subjecting the user to these, tedious form fields? And again, because we are visual by nature, we said, what about images? What if we had a carousel of images that they went through and they simply responded me or not me to those images? And that was kind of the start of things. And then eventually led us to working with colleges and workforce boards to help match to majors and career paths. And then that's ultimately evolved into what we're doing today, which is helping enterprises select best fit talent.
Yeah. It's such a great story, how it started with a bad blind date. And you've got more value out of that bad blind date than most people will ever get out of one.
Absolutely.
But so the leap from, the traditional format to visual is a big leap. What went into validating that? How do you validate the results?
So that's where I come in. I have to admit, when I first started working for Traitify, it was as a consultant, and they hired me to come in and work to create the Big Five and validate the assessments. And I was skeptical. I come from a much more academic background where it's very, longer pen and paper tests that are longer sentences. And but then I really looked into what they were doing and the science behind it. And then I just got excited. So when we went really to validate the assessment and then to create the careers assessment that was originally there, and then to really create our Big Five or 5-factor assessment, we looked at all the standard psychometric things that you look at when you want to validate an assessment. And that's really my background. So I have a background in psychometrics. So we made sure that those indicators that the IO psychs in the room would look for were there. And we really spent a lot of time and conducted a lot of studies refining the assessment until we got to a place where we hit all of those metrics. And that really is what we did. It was a lot of time, a lot of science. And, now we have extensive technical manuals that lay that all out for our users.
Yeah, and that's really the key for a customer, right? Is that knowing that they're using a validated science, and that that the products or the assessments they're using are backed by this scientific approach and reviewed by the community, and you're hitting on those. So what do your customers tell you about this? And I guess customers and candidates, because there are two sides to this. What kind of value do they get from this visual approach? What's different from their perspective?
Well, I think the way we started this discussion, the word fun is an interesting part we get from our clients. Often fun and assessments are light years apart from each other. And we've really found a way to make this fun and interesting for a candidate. Because of that, more candidates complete it than the average assessment by a large percentage. It's about 96%. And we've done about 20 million assessments now. So it's a huge volume that we're going through. And it's really because we're trying to make an experience they want to do and they'll enjoy and they get something out of, which is just not what assessments have typically done in the past for the candidate.
Yeah. So you're giving something back to the candidate at the end of the process. It's not just going into the void to the
Right.
for somebody to make a decision.
Yeah, that's right, George. So very important for us was, giving back something and showing reciprocity in the process, because to your point, the candidate's putting a lot of time and energy into every application. And often it is just this black hole experience where they have no idea what's going to come out the other side. So we made it a point to create a unique candidate report or candidate output that can be shared as part of the experience directly with the candidate, and give them feedback in terms of their own personality, and give them tools that they can use maybe in that particular job, but also as they go forward in their job search.
Yeah, that's key. And so now on to the big the next big achievement. what, moving toward this avatar, this animated approach, what was the spark there? I mean, you honestly, I talk about Traitify when I'm talking to HR leaders, talent acquisition leaders who are looking for, what's new in assessments, and really what else is new, right? There's, again, that incremental path, and this is what I like about it is how it's based on validated science, and it's visual. So it's the experience that's improved with all of the added benefit of this foundational science. So what was it that led you to then going to the, a whole nother level, as they say? What was that spark?
Yeah, I think there were two key things that led us to this point. The first one is we've kind of been obsessed with the phrase "a picture's worth 1,000 words" ever since we started this company. And that's a really interesting phrase when you really start to dig into it. How can you actually measure the words in an image? Well, that's what we've been doing for the last decade, is really trying to extract as many words as we can from each image to make this assessment go faster and have more data behind it. And to be honest, we were probably extracting 100 or 200 words. So we knew there was still room to get to the 1,000. And we felt like if we could design and create every element of the image, every element of what we do in the light of the psychologist's eyes, we could really build something that was more valid, deeper in its meaning, and extracting the maximum amount of information from the image. The second part of that was the character, this person or this thing that was like your guiding light within the assessment. We knew we could do better around inclusion, and we wanted to create something that was a more inclusive experience for everyone that was taking the assessment. So by having that control of both the image itself and the character within it, we could kind of take the assessment to another level.
So is the inclusion factor the reason why it leads to an avatar and not just, some animated, like more stock characters? Is that where the key, is that the key avatar point?
Yeah, absolutely, George. So when we set out to build the animated assessment, one of our key requirements was that we wanted it to include this character that was neutral from a gender, race, and age perspective. So we want to say we started this project in 2020, and we spent at least the first 6 to 8 months developing the character. So that took on, going through multiple phases of testing out different types of faces, different types of hair, different types of bodies, and just, studying this with actual participants who could give us feedback on what they saw in each of those elements, and also help us understand, are we creating something that's, so otherworldly that it's unnerving and no one will want to look at it, or something that's actually, engaging and more comforting to look at. So there was, from the jump, such a scientific process that we took, while also combining that very artistic, creative spirit too, which I think ultimately that's what's made Traitify kind of continually special and innovative. Is, to Heather's point, we brought in our psychologists, but we also have, these 3D animators, of product people who are bringing all these unique disciplines to the table to create something that's pretty special.
Yeah. I mean, knowing the effort that went into the existing visual format for validation, the same amount of rigor here, Heather, in with Ash?
I would say even more. We were even more rigorous this time, because we really wanted to test several different things. First of all, this was the first time, like from a psychologist perspective, this is the dream where we had full control over the kinds of things that we put into the images, right? So we could make sure that the images match the captions better, and we could, change it if they didn't. So lots of phases around that. Testing the character, just trying to get a character that as many people as possible could relate to, and having that one character that you could follow through the assessment, so you always know what perspective you're taking in any slide. You know which character you are, what perspective you have. And we, in this particular instance, we did something that we hadn't really done before, which I think is becoming more of the kind of scientific standard, which is we oversampled for different minority ethnic groups. So we oversampled 4 groups so that we made sure we had enough individuals in our sample that we can make sure that the character that we were creating really was relatable across various groups. So, and then add that to all the scientific rigor around things like, convergent validity and predictive validity and all those psychometrics that I was talking about before. And you end up with this assessment, which I'm, really proud of, not just from it's super fun and engaging and cool, but it's really scientifically sound.
That's great. That's great. So, so Ash has been out meeting customers and candidates, right? What are they saying? How are they responding?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, I feel like with anything you do for this amount of time, and we have been working on this for over 2 years, which is a little hard to believe, but it gets to a point where you start to get a little nervous about what the reception will be, because certainly I think over the time and doing all these studies, we quickly became convinced that we were onto something and we created something pretty special, but there was still this question mark of, once we put it out there in front of clients and candidates, are people going to look at this and say, what is this? This is weird. I don't understand what's going on here. And frankly, the response has been exactly the opposite. We have clients who are asking for Ash swag and want the, a hat with Ash on it. It's almost become this Mickey Mouse-esque character where people have fallen in love with it and quickly want to put Ash on everything that they own. So from my perspective, I think the reaction's been far more positive than even we could have hoped for, which has been great to see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And well, you'll have to have an Ash, in your trade show booth or something if you're out on the trade show circuit. So what types of companies, you're getting this great response, what type of company or what type of hiring would benefit the most from Traitify and Paradox?
We work with all different types of companies, but probably our core target has been around the hourly company in general. So Traitify really found its success in kind of restaurant, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, logistics, that world. We've expanded beyond that over time, but still, I think a lot of what we've done, we've focused in on that high volume hourly worker. How can we create an experience that's really targeted and designed for them? Another benefit of the animated assessment actually is some of the custom things that can happen with that as well. Because we can control all those elements of the images, we can add subtle branding opportunities in there for businesses as well. So that's something we've never had before in assessment, but a way to just kind of put their own colors or their logos or some of their things in very subtle placements that make it unique to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's so smart for Paradox, given the experience, the conversational experience that's got a, not an avatar to my knowledge, but a persona attached to it in Olivia. And you're going through this, engaging experience. And when you get to the assessment, there's the embodiment of this avatar that, it's, I can see how from a brand perspective and from a values and vision perspective, the alignment is there. And you were working on this based on the timeline you shared before you became part of the Paradox team. Yeah,
it's been a long-standing vision that we've had that we really wanted to bring out, and we started working on it, like Josh said, in 2020. But I do really feel like the marriage with Paradox was so ideal with this and took it to the next level. Paradox is all about conversational AI, and we're continuing the conversation in a visual way, which is kind of neat. So Olivia and Ash can kind of work hand in hand now through that entire process to carry you through the apply all the way through the assessment experience.
Yeah. So, okay, you took the market to visual. That was a big innovation. Now you took the market to an avatar. What's next for Tradify and the product and the science? What's next?
Yeah, I think there's a lot still to be done from this visual perspective, George. So I think obviously this is a huge leap forward in going the route of 3D animation, but I think something that still is kind of not rubbing us right is it's static, right? There's this image that doesn't move. So I think ultimately our hypothesis is that as we add motion, we'll be able to continue to increase the amount of information we're able to relay in a very short amount of time. So starting next year, we'll start to test some of those theories, and we already have some initial concepts on how we can add motion to these images. Very small motion, nothing that's going to be, you know, too crazy or requiring the candidate to sit through, you know, a lengthy video. But we think there's additional ways that we can not only increase the experience and the engagement of the experience, but also increase the predictive power of the assessment through adding things like that.
I mean, if we all, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we have a unique opportunity in HR tech as a whole to look at things that are happening outside of our world, like social apps and e-commerce things and things like that, and figure out how do we apply elements of that into our world. And when you look at something like Reels or TikTok, like you can see a potential of a format and a style that could be applied in HR tech in a very unique and different way. And we're definitely looking at how that could happen with the assessment.
Well, and if we all start donning headsets and, you know, connecting in the, you know, Web3 metaverse, it seems like Ash is poised for that kind of environment. Are you thinking about that? Not to put you on the spot, but
we're certainly thinking about it. I mean, I think it's a little ways out in our world and how it gets applied. But I mean, Ash could be your first guide in HR to the metaverse. Like it's a possibility.
There you go. There you go. So how can folks learn more about Ash, learn more about Traitify and Paradox?
You can go to the Paradox website, and you can kind of find from there the Traitify section and go through and learn more about that from there. You can also reach out directly to any one of the three of us. We're happy to kind of give you more information or go deeper with this. Yeah.
And that's paradox.ai. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's great. Well, this has been terrific. I could drill in on this stuff for an hour, but I know there's a lot of content there in the site that will help everyone. Thank you all for your time and for telling the story about Traitify and about Ash.
Thanks so much for having us, George. We really appreciate it.
Great. And thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.